The next item of business is a statement by Shirley-Ann Somerville on winter heating payment. The Cabinet Secretary will take questions at the end. Point of order, Paul O'Kane.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And on a point of order, I seek your guidance regarding this afternoon's statement. It appears that, once again, the content of this statement has appeared in the media prior to the statement being made to Parliament. Indeed, I note that the Scottish Government appeared to have an embargoed press release on their website at a minute past midnight. And I raise this, Presiding Officer, simply because it is not the first time that issues of this nature regarding winter heating payment assistance and more broadly have been pre-briefed to the media. And if it is the contention of the Government that there is no detail in this statement that wasn't already in the public domain, then it will perhaps beg the question for people, what is the point of the statement at all? But the principle here, Presiding Officer, I believe, is that this chamber should be the place where statements are made and not the media, and I would appreciate your guidance on this matter.
Thank you, Mr O'Kane. I think members are well aware of my expectations, in line with long-established guidance, that where a ministerial statement has been scheduled, the content of that statement must be made first of all to this Parliament. Now, I have not had an opportunity to look into the matter that Mr O'Kane raises, but I will certainly do so. I will pick up where I was with regards to the next item of business. There's a statement by Shirley-Ann Somerville on the winter heating payment, and the Cabinet Secretary will take questions at the end of her statement, and so there should be no interventions or interruptions. And I call on the Cabinet Secretary up to 10 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and I am pleased to be able to make a statement to the Chamber today, as asked for by the Scottish Conservatives, on the uptake of the winter heating payment across the last 5 years. Winter heating payment is the Scottish Government benefit to support people on low incomes with the cost of heating over the winter months. Our benefit replaced the DWP's cold weather payment in winter 2022-23. It provides a targeted, reliable and guaranteed annual payment of £58.75 to those most in need of help with their energy costs every winter, including people of pension age, disabled adults and families who have a responsibility for either a child under the age of 5 or a disabled child. The UK Government's cold weather payment previously provided £25 per cold spell only when the average of the mean daily temperature recorded was equal to or below 0 degrees for 7 consecutive days, an entire week. This UK Government benchmark is, of course, totally arbitrary. Temperatures are measured at weather stations often miles from people's homes, failing to take into account other factors such as wind, chill and driving rain, which can have a major impact on the temperature of people's homes, particularly, of course, those on low incomes. This UK Government reliance on an arbitrary and arcane definition of what is cold and what isn't meant, for example, that in winter 21-22, in areas of Edinburgh, Glasgow, Shetland, Orkney, Wick and Fife, for example, absolutely no payments were made, not a single one. Importantly, when planning our winter heating payment, we listened carefully to feedback from our public consultation and our social security experience panels, as we do with all our benefits, of course, which we co-design with the people who will be receiving them, a marked difference between our approach and the UK Government's. And what people told us is that they overwhelmingly supported the removal of the cold spell requirement. Age UK similarly supported the removal of this requirement and has called on the UK Government to do the same. That's why our winter heating payment breaks the link with an arbitrarily defined winter weather dependency and provides financial support, no matter the weather, so that low-income households will automatically be paid and know that they are going to be paid, and do not have the uncertainty of waiting for weather readings for 7 consecutive days before receiving a payment. Due to the cold spell requirements, as few as 4,000 people received a payment in 2019-20 and just 11,000 getting one in 21-22. In sharp contrast, when our winter heating payment was launched in 2022-23, the total number of people who received it were 398,240. Official statistics show that more than 453,000 people got winter heating payments last winter from the Scottish Government, thanks to an investment of £25 million. This winter, we will invest even more, £26.8 million for winter heating payment. And that more than triples the £8.5 million provided on average by the DWP in the last 7 years prior to the introduction of our payment. As of the 15th of December 2024, over 218,000 winter heating payments have so far been made to people this winter, totalling £12.8 million, with the remaining payments due to be completed by the end of next month. In recognition of the current pressures on household budgets, winter heating payment was uprated by 10.1% from £50 to £55.05 for winter 23-24 and by a further 6.7% for this winter to £58.75. Eligibility to winter heating payment is linked to the receipt of relevant reserve benefits such as universal credit and pension credit, among others. And while Scottish ministers have no formal role in the administration of reserve benefits, the Scottish Government is absolutely committed to ensuring that Scottish people are supported to take up benefits they are entitled to. We have committed to investing over £12 million for the provision of free income maximisation support, welfare and debt advice services in 24-25. Including support for the Citizens Advice Scotland Money Talk Team service, which last year supported over 9,000 older people as part of our coordinated benefit take-up strategy. Of course, winter heating payment is not the only form of support the Scottish Government provides to help people to meet their heating costs. In November, I announced that the Scottish Government will invest a further £20 million in the Scottish Welfare Fund's budget to be distributed to councils this financial year, in line with the existing distribution arrangements agreed with COSLA. This increase will help councils meet increased demands upon the fund and will go some way to providing vital support to people in crisis. I also confirmed that we will invest an additional £20 million into the Warmer Homes Scotland scheme, our national fuel poverty scheme, taking the total investment in this scheme to £85 million this financial year. This scheme focuses on long-term sustainable measures, and this additional funding will help approximately 1,500 additional households to install energy efficiency measures and more efficient heating systems, saving on average around £400 per year per household on energy bills. And most importantly, in November I announced that ahead of next winter I will bring forward regulations to introduce a universal pension age winter heating payment in winter 25-26 for every Scottish pensioner household of at least £100, with those in receipt of relevant low-income benefits receiving £200 or £300 depending on their age. This universal benefit will provide much-needed support and not available anywhere else in the UK, and it will deliver support to all Scottish pensioner households, as we had always intended to do before the UK Government decision to cut the winter fuel payment. We are also continuing our child winter heating payment, which last year provided £7.8 million to support over 33,000 children, young people and their families who had higher energy needs due to disability or a health condition. This benefit is not available elsewhere in the UK. In total, this winter, we are forecasted to invest over £65 million in our 3 winter heating benefits, which will provide vital support to over 630,000 people with their energy bills. All of these programmes provide valuable support with energy bills to people across Scotland. But as I have previously highlighted to this chamber, we all recognise that households across the country acutely feel twin pressures. Firstly, cuts to the social security budgets made over many years by successive UK governments, Conservative and now Labour. And secondly, rising energy costs, despite Labour's promise before the election that people's energy bills would fall if they were in government. Of course, they are set to rise again this month. Presiding Officer, this year alone, the Scottish Government has already spent £134 million mitigating the effects of UK Government welfare decisions, and in doing so, we are working closely with our partners in local government across Scotland, supporting people in crisis. Although we can't mitigate every decision made by the UK Government, we are determined to provide support for the people of Scotland. Our winter heating payment is just one example of how we are using our devolved powers to make a positive difference and to support the people of Scotland with their rising energy costs. Reliable, guaranteed, not dependent on arbitrary temperature readings, designed in partnership with the people who are receiving it, and providing support to more than double the number of people who previously got help under the DWP, our winter heating payment is a very clear example of how this Scottish Government is doing more to support the people of Scotland through the long, cold winter months.
Thank you. The Cabinet Secretary will now take questions on the issues raised in her statement. I intend to allow around 20 minutes for questions, after which we'll move on to the next item of business. And I'd be grateful if members who wish to put a question were to press their request to speak buttons. And I call on Liz Smith.
Well, thank you for the statement, Cabinet Secretary. But of course, the Scottish Government's proposed pension age winter fuel payment for winter 2025-26 is not actually a reinstatement of the pension of the previous UK Government's winter heating payment, as that payment provided £200 to every pensioner and £300 to those over 80 years old. But the Scottish Government's policy gives £100 as a universal payment. So can I actually ask the Cabinet Secretary, what criteria did the Scottish Government use to make this different policy decision, which obviously does not reinstate the previous payment? And secondly, what did the Scottish Government, did they give any consideration to whether the winter heating payment should include extra support for extreme weather situations, even if they disagreed with the previous criteria?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I am a bit confused about the principles behind where the Scottish Conservatives want to go on social security, because in budget debates and indeed in First Minister's questions, we're continually challenged to cut social security expenditure. And now Liz Smith seems to be asking me to spend more money on a scheme than we are already providing. And if Liz Smith genuinely wishes to do that, then of course budget negotiations are continuing, and she can explain to me and to the Cabinet Secretary for Finance where that money would come from to be able to deliver that. We've gone over, Presiding Officer, in great detail previously the details of the pension age winter heating payment, and I am very, very pleased that this Government will reintroduce a universal winter heating payment for all pensioner households. I think that's exactly what people would expect their government to do. And in terms of the questions around the overall winter heating payment for those on low incomes, again, I take from that Liz Smith thinks we should be doing more than we already are, and therefore spending more on social security than we already are. I went through in my statement why I think the principles behind the policy that we have, based on that co-design with people, have provided extra support, financial certainty for people at important times. But again, if Liz Smith wishes us to spend more money on social security, then I'm happy to have those discussions with her. But let's be honest about what the intent is behind those questions, and whether she would actually genuinely wish me to deliver that. And if she did, that would be taking part in the budget discussions, and to date, Presiding Officer, it has not.
Paul O'Kane.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for advance sight of the statement. And the Cabinet Secretary and colleagues have said much in recent weeks about the impact of winter pressures and cold temperatures, but the statement today appears to be old numbers being put together in a new way to suggest that the Scottish Government is taking action on these issues, and perhaps that's why it was pre-briefed to the media. So I wonder if I can ask the Cabinet Secretary, because we've had this conversation in the Chamber before. The Scottish Labour have been calling on a package of measures to support people this winter from that £41 million consequential from the Household Support Fund, which the Cabinet Secretary said didn't exist. Instead, what the Cabinet Secretary seems to have announced is simply plugging gaps that were created by real terms cuts in the previous budget. And we've had no detail since that statement on the practical measures to deploy the funding. So I wonder if the Cabinet Secretary would outline how much of that funding is already out of the door and how many people it is supporting. And finally, the Cabinet Secretary is aware that we have called for the reinstatement of the Fuel Insecurity Fund as an alternative mechanism to use those consequentials targeting those most in need. And FOI responses have shown that when the Government made the decision to cut that fund, Fuel Insecurity partners expressed great concern that they could no longer, quote, deliver innovative measures that were taking people out of crisis situations. So I wonder if the Cabinet Secretary would agree that that move was regrettable, and will she confirm if the Scottish Government have looked at the option to revive that in line with calls from this side of the Chamber and campaigners?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the reason that the figures in the statement today are the figures that are already in the public domain is because we regularly produce and publish statements. And the reason I'm here today is that I was asked if the Government could actually do this statement, and here I am delivering that statement. So I genuinely don't get why Paul O'Kane is surprised that the figures are already in the public domain. He usually complains that we don't publish enough information, Presiding Officer. With this £41 million, again, we're going over old ground, but let's go over it again just one more time. Until there is certainty about the totality of in-year consequentials, then I'm sorry, I don't think it is sensible for the government to actually start talking and putting money out the door until that certainty is there. And that's the difference, Presiding Officer, about being responsible about the public finances in Scotland and then what Mr O'Kane is asking me to do. If he wishes to see money going into the Fuel Insecurity Fund, again, I go back to the point I've made to Liz Smith. The budget for next year is not yet passed. If he wishes to see that money coming forward, perhaps that's what might tempt him off the fence from abstaining and actually vote for the budget, as well as the mitigation for the two-child cap and as well as the reintroduction of universal payments. And, Presiding Officer, the best way to actually support people that are having difficulty with energy costs is the social tariff. That's work that this Scottish Government, along with energy providers, is getting on with for the benefit of the UK Government, who should be doing that work, but we'll get on and do the work. And then once we have that working group with recommendations, they better get on and deliver that.
Christine Graham, to be followed by Jeremy Balfour.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Cabinet Secretary, I very much welcome the universal £100 winter fuel payment for 25-26 to all pensioners not able to access a Labour government means-tested UK winter fuel payment, not, of course, in the pre-election manifesto, suddenly leaving many pensioners literally out in the cold. But many pensioners like me are fortunate enough not to require the previous £300 and we paid it over to local charities. While this would still be available with £100, that is, to remit to local charities, would it be possible for the Scottish Government to provide a means by which those pensioners, like me, could repay that money to the Scottish Government or indeed opt out?
Cabinet Secretary.
Can I thank Christine Graham for this question, because I think it is a very important aspect as we try to look at the best way to use the finances that we have to support people. So under our planned universal pension age winter heating payment, clients will be able to opt out if they do not wish to receive one. In order to opt out of a payment, clients will first need to be on the Social Security Scotland systems. So for this reason, for the first year of launch, clients will not be able to opt out until after Social Security Scotland has received and processed the client data from the DWP. But from year 2 onwards, we are working towards the introduction of a system within the agency where we will have the data available to manage client opt-out. So I hope that responds to the direct ask from Christine Graham, and it's a very important point that we are endeavouring to build into the system in future years.
Jeremy Balfour, to be followed by Emma Roddick.
Presiding Officer, according to the statement, I think over half the people entitled to repayment have not received any money as of 15th December, and it will be another 5 weeks until everybody receives the entitlement they are due to. Could the Cabinet Secretary tell us why there is such a delay in these payments coming through, and in the year ahead, will these be paid earlier than they have been paid this year?
Cabinet Secretary.
So we have moved the payments forward, Presiding Officer. The first year in 22-23, the payments weren't coming through until spring, so we have already moved that forward. The reason for the last payments being made in February is because we take a second sweep of data from the DWP to ensure that those that are fully eligible at that time of entitlement are gathered up within the final payment. So the reason why there is 5 weeks until the last people are paid are because we wait that DWP information to ensure we've swept up absolutely everybody that is entitled to. So that's the right thing to do to ensure that we are getting as many people paid as possible. And I hope that gives Mr Balfour reassurance that that's a sensible final step in the process to ensure people get the money that they're entitled to.
Emma Roddick, to be followed by Colin Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Having spent the last week at home in the Highlands, I know just how harsh the cold that many of my constituents are facing right now is. And I'm glad that the Scottish Government continues to deliver different winter heating payments to them, despite Labour's decision to inexplicably remove funding from pensioners across the Highlands and Islands this winter. Can the Cabinet Secretary share what the uptake has been like for the different Scottish winter heating payments in the Highlands and Islands region?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think perhaps the best way to respond to that is once, as I've said to Mr Balfour, that final payment session is through within 5 weeks, and then I'll be able to give Emma Roddick the full picture of what's happening within the Highlands and Islands region. She does point to the very important example, and I alluded to it in my statement, that many communities did not receive any payments in previous years, particularly those in island authorities, and that's a difference that we've been making to that. I'll give an example of Orkney, Shetland, for example, that are receiving that benefit that we would not have done so during the previous scheme. But I will revert to the member in writing once this year's payments are fully completed to give her that information, and I hope reassurance about how we are delivering right across the Highlands and Islands.
Colin Smith, to be followed by Bob Doris.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary referred to funding for the Warmer Homes Scotland scheme, but what discussions has she had with her colleagues over the consistent failure of the Government to spend the budget it sets aside for area-based energy efficiency projects? Does she not agree that failing to spend £62 million of the £192 million allocated in the last 3 years is appalling, and as is the fact that research by the Chartered Institute of Building shows that less than 40% of older people are even aware of the Government's energy efficiency schemes?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the member raises a very important point about raising awareness on the schemes that are available, and that becomes even more prescient when we see people who are no longer entitled to support in other ways. If the member will forgive me, I'll get back to him in writing, or perhaps one of my colleagues will, as the specific aspects around that policy are within the net zero portfolio, and I'll provide to that response to him in writing.
Thank you. Bob Doris, to be followed by Maggie Chapman.
Presiding Officer, when Labour ditched a universal winter heating payment for older people, they abandoned many vulnerable older people, not least of all those who qualify for pension credit but who do not claim it and who can be particularly vulnerable. Pension credit uptake may be a UK responsibility, but will the Scottish Government give details of what it will do to maximise uptake and to boost pension income, so that, unlike the UK Government, we continue to do the right thing by Scotland's pensioners?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, Bob Doris raises a very important point about the need to encourage people and support people to ensure that they're getting the benefits that they're entitled to. That's why Scotland has a benefit take-up strategy when it comes to our devolved benefits. We're the only part of the UK that does so. And even where we don't have responsibility, as Mr Doris points out, for pension credit, we are very keen to make sure we're doing as much as possible. So work within Social Security Scotland around encouraging the take-up of pension credit has been one example. And I would also put on record again my thanks to councils who have also worked exceptionally hard to attempt to increase the level of take-up within pension credit. That's a very important piece of work that they have also been undertaken, and I thank them for doing so.
Maggie Chapman, to be followed by Liam MacArthur.
Thank you. This payment in Scotland is undoubtedly very welcome, but should we not be looking beyond mitigation at what we can be doing to ensure everyone lives in comfortably warm homes, whatever the weather, whatever the season, whatever their income? Too many homes are poorly insulated and drafty. A warmth audit of all domestic properties, perhaps starting with those in receipt of winter heating payments, might be a more transformative approach if that audit was then responded to systematically. Is this something the Cabinet Secretary would consider?
Cabinet Secretary.
Can I thank Maggie Chapman for that suggestion, and again I think it points out to the ways that statements like this can provide potential solutions for challenges that we're all sharing. I'm sure Maggie Chapman and her other colleagues within the Scottish Greens are also again taking part in those budgetary discussions with the Scottish Government as we move forward with our budget process, and if she wishes that to be a priority that is looked at both by the Cabinet Secretary for Finance and my colleague Gillian Martin in Net Zero, we'll be happy to take that under consideration as we go forward with our budgetary discussions.
Liam MacArthur, to be followed by Marie McNair.
Thank you. While help with fuel bills is, of course, welcome, we must do more to bring down the overall cost of those bills. Area-based energy efficiency schemes have proven their worth, and more funding for these, again, is welcome. Yet too often councils have insufficient notice of funding allocations, and some appear unable to spend what they are given. Orkney Islands Council has consistently made full use of the area-based funding available in an area with the highest level of fuel poverty in the country. So, like Colin Smith, can I urge the Government to review the scheme's operation to ensure councils get more notice or indeed multi-year funding, and that where there are risks of underspends, reallocation of funds can take place in a timely fashion?
Cabinet Secretary.
Can I thank Liam MacArthur for that question? He again raised a very important point around certainty of funding. And if I can particularly focus on the request for multi-year funding, I do think that's something that the Government takes very seriously. It's a call that's made over a number of parts of different portfolios within Government, and I recognise the point he's making here. Clearly, it is challenging for the Scottish Government to move forward with further multi-year commitments when the budget given to the Scottish Government is only on a one-year basis. And that does make it more challenging. That's why the work that's been undertaken by the UK Government for spending reviews is exceptionally important in this. It will hope I provide some degree of certainty about what's happening within Scottish Government budgets over future years, and therefore allow us to take more decisions around where multi-year expenditure can be undertaken. We are endeavouring to do that already, both in revenue and capital, in different areas of government, whether it's in the third sector, whether it's in culture, for example. But I take the point that he's making around this and the need for that type of certainty in this area too.
Marie McNair, to be followed by Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Labour promises a new direction, but now we see it means they will rush in brutal cuts to winter support for pensioners. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that this betrayal underlines just how important it is that decisions on winter heating benefits are made here, where our devolved Parliament can listen to vulnerable households and make the right decisions for the people of Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I noticed Marie McNair's quite rightly also recognising that Labour are now talking about a new direction. I take it, Presiding Officer, they realised that change line wasn't quite working when people were realising no change was actually happening. She does raise a very important point, and it goes to how we talk about social security. We had a near consensus, with the exception of the Scottish Conservatives, I think, talking about social security as an investment in people and in our communities. We now have Scottish Labour, and I see again on the front pages of some of the papers today, Presiding Officer, the UK Labour Government talking about handouts and cuts to social security. And I think that's a very, very obvious difference between how this Government is attempting, with the financial resources that we have, to deliver for people still impacted by a cost of living crisis, and a UK Government and Scottish Labour that seem to be both in step talking about handouts and actually increasing stigma towards people in social security. And I think that's a deeply disappointing new direction for Labour.
Craig Hoy, to be followed by Colette Stevenson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In 2024, a number of energy suppliers restarted the process of installing prepaid meters without consent for customers who had fallen into debt. Given that those on prepaid meters are often the poorest and most vulnerable in society, and that they often pay more per unit for gas and electricity, will the Cabinet Secretary work with Ofgem to identify how many pensioner and other households are on PPMs in Scotland? And will she press for an amnesty to allow existing customers to opt out of prepaid meters and explore explore a ban on the future involuntary installations of the meters now and into the future?
Cabinet Secretary.
Again, it's a very important point that Craig Hoy is raising. One of the challenges we do have, I'll be frank, Presiding Officer, is a great deal of the powers within these areas is not for the Scottish Government or the Scottish Parliament, but lie down in Westminster. But that does not stop the Government using its convening powers and the powers of facilitation to be able to work with energy providers. I recently met, for example, with energy providers on the issues concerning housing. He does raise an important point about the difficulties that those in prepayment meters have and the impact that those can have on the debt levels and people's ability to heat their homes. And I think it's another area where we need to look very carefully at what the Government can do here, using its convening and facilitation powers, and what we must continue to persuade the UK Government or Ofgem to be able to take forward.
Colette Stevenson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Under the previous UK cold weather payments for East Kilbride residents were conditional on the weather recorded at Bishopton. And given the different winter climates, this disadvantaged people in East Kilbride who often got no payout even when it was below freezing in the town. Can the Cabinet Secretary outline how many more people are benefiting from the Scottish Government's winter heating payment across the country? And can she assure households in East Kilbride that the injustice of the old Westminster scheme is now a thing of the past?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I think it's fitting that we have a question about East Kilbride from Colette Stevenson on this, because I remember very clearly as we debated what this new statement, this new benefit would look like when it was devolved. Her predecessor, Linda Fabiani, was one of the most vociferous campaigners to ensure that we got rid of the injustice of the previous arbitrary systems, because it did not reflect what was happening in her local area. I'm very pleased that the Scottish Government has been able to deliver that certainty for the constituents of Colette Stevenson and indeed members across the chamber, and I'll respond to her in writing, as I will with Emma Roddick, about the totality of the provision both in her constituency and, I hope, throughout Scotland, to be able to reassure her about the difference that we have made once again this winter.
Thank you. That concludes the ministerial statement. I will allow a moment or two for front benches to organise for the next item of business.